Hello. Has everyone joined?
No, ma'am, only 19 participants are there, ma'am.
How many are expected?
45 or 53, like that, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll wait for some time. Till then, I'll start sharing my screen.
Okay, ma'am.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Anuradha Nautiyal. I'm a PhD scholar in University of Hyderabad under Dr. NDS Nagasima. I'm in fourth year of my PhD, and today I'll be taking your class on theories of emotion. I'll start by sharing my screen. Let's wait for a few minutes till everyone joins. We'll start once the participant number is above 30. Good morning to those who have joined. Now, I'm Anuradha Nautiyal, and I'll be taking your class on theories of emotions. We'll start by learning the objectives of this topic. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, I'm starting. So please pay attention because we'll be going through some 36 slides, and after that, we'll take up any queries or any questions that you have. So the objectives of this topic are that after going through these topics, you'll be able to understand different theories of emotions, role of physiology in emotions, and physiological changes in emotions. What these different things mean, we'll get to it as we go through the slides. A brief overview of what I'll be talking about, a very brief introduction. Then we'll be talking about theories of emotions, James Lange theory of emotion, Canon Bart theory of emotion, Stature Singer theory of emotion, Richard Lazarus theory of emotion, Donald Linsley theory of emotion, and then we'll go learn about role of physiology in emotion, in which there are two subtopics, which are emotional processing in the brain and physiological changes during emotions. A very brief introduction. You must have learned what emotions are. So defining emotion, moods or feelings is not very easy, and much more so it is difficult to understand. But we'll go through a basic definition of emotion, which is it is a feeling state involving thoughts, physiological changes, and an outward expression or behavior. What this means is an expression involves thoughts, physiological changes, that means the bodily changes, and an outward expression or how we are expressing our feelings or emotions in our behavior. But when we go through these definitions, what has troubled psychologists for a long time is what comes first. Is it the thought? Is it our bodily changes, or is it our expression or behavior which comes first? So basing our further expansion on that, we'll be talking about different theories where different psychologists have talked about what comes first according to them. And we'll see if they are correct or not based on our own understanding. The first one is James Lange theory of emotion. Just one second. William James believed that order of the components of emotions was quite different from what? In the beginning, when psychologists were trying to understand what emotions mean, there was a common sense theory of emotion, which said that when you have a physical arousal, that's when you experience emotion. A very basic thing, like I see a dog, I get scared. Basic thing, common sense. But what William James said, that the components of emotion, it is quite different from what the common sense pertains. And at the same time, a psychologist and a physiologist in Denmark, Carl Lange, came up with with an explanation similar to that of James, and that's how we call it the James Lange theory of emotion. So they did not sit together and write this theory. It's just that two people happen to understand the same phenomena in the same way, and that's why we call it James Lange theory of emotion. In this theory, a stimulus of some sort produces a physiological reaction. Example, you're walking down the street and you see a dog. Now, what will be your reaction? Based on your internal mechanism, it will be either to fight the situation or run away from the situation, which we in psychology call the fight or flight mechanism. So what James Lange said is that there will be some stimulus, and based on that stimulus, our body will produce a physiological reaction, and then we'll experience the emotion. So there will be stimulus, there will be physiological response, then there will be the experience of that physiological response, and then there will be experience of emotion. So what they said, there is a certain way of going about understanding emotion, which is, as you can see, stimulus, physiological response, experience of physiological response, experience of emotion. You are walking down the street, you see a dog who's being aggressive, your heart rate increases, you have trouble breathing, you start getting dry mouth, and then you experience the emotion, which is fear. Okay, now you're understanding that I'm afraid of the dog. So a very basic understanding of emotions for James Lange was that first you see the stimulus, then there is arousal, then there is physiological arousal in the shape of increased heart rate, increased heart rate, or dry mouth, or getting nervous, tingling in your fingertips, and then you'll experience the emotion. So James and Lange believed that the physical arousal led to the labeling of emotion. Simply put, I'm afraid because I am aroused. I'm embarrassed because my face is red. I'm nervous because my stomach is fluttering. I'm in love because my heart rate increases when I look at her or him. So, okay, does anyone have a question till now? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So a very basic thing that James and Lange said, that physiological arousal led to the labeling of emotion. First arousal and then the labeling of emotion. But this we'll see that we'll have some shortfalls. We'll talk about that. So in people who have spinal cord injuries, do you think that their nervous system, their parasympathetic nervous system or their sympathetic nervous system is functioning well? It is not functioning well. And according to James and Lange, when we'll feel the physiological arousal, then only we can express the emotion. But what about people who cannot feel the physiological arousal? That was the basic shortfall, the shortcoming of this theory. Several studies of people with spinal cord injuries report that these people are capable of experiencing the same emotions after their injury as before, and sometimes even more intensely. And one other study done by the person we'll be talking about later, Stature and Singer, they injected some people with adrenaline, and they said that increased heart rate was found only to lead to specific emotion when cognitive prompts were made. What this means is specific emotions were happened only when certain prompts were made. So not all physiological arousals led to experiencing of emotions. So this was a shortcoming of James Lange theory. And ma'am, your camera is on. Okay, we'll continue anyway.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yes, yes, sir.
This is regarding, any difference than facial feedback theory. Facial feedback theory also gives the same thing.
No, sir. So this is James Lange theory. Facial.
It's Lange theory also. Firstly, you have a event. After that, arousal. After that, interpretation, emotion.
Yes, sir.
Now, whereas this facial feedback theory also says event, then facial changes. What is facial changes in arousal and interpretation together?
Okay, sir.
These are muscular developments. Then after that, you have emotion.
Okay, sir. Sir, facial feedback theory only talks about the facial expression of emotion. What James and Lange said is that the physiological responses, that is our sympathetic nervous system, that will experience something and then will experience the emotion. So facial feedback only talks about the expression of emotion on our face. James Lange, they talked about sympathetic nervous system being a part of experiencing the emotion.
Thank you. I got it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So the basic shortcoming of James Lange theory was that not all people will be experiencing the physiological arousals. That is, the sympathetic nervous system will not be the same in every person, especially the people who are injured and having spinal cord injuries. But that does not mean that they will not experience emotion. So when James and Lange put forward this theory, there were many criticisms, and then some more people worked on theories of emotion. Cannon and Bart theory of emotion. We'll be talking about this now. Physiologist Walter Cannon and Philip Bart theorized that emotion and physiological arousal occur more or less at the same time. Now, what James and Lange talked was there will be physiological arousal and then there will be experience of emotion. So those things will happen one after the other, not at the same time. What Cannon and Bart said that those things cannot happen one after the other. I cannot feel I cannot see that my heart rate is increasing and then feel that I'm being afraid of something. It will happen at the same time. Cannon, an expert in sympathetic arousal mechanism, did not feel that the physical changes caused by various emotions were distinct enough to allow them to be perceived as different emotions. So what he means is that maybe I'm looking at a dog and the dog is growling, and I'm feeling that my heart rate is increasing, I'm having dry mouth, and I'm having this flight mechanism that, okay, I should run in the other direction. But is my body able to perceive those emotions as different? Is that, will I be able to perceive at the same time that, okay, I'm afraid, or will I say that, okay, now I'm not afraid? maybe I should just stand here and see how the dog reacts. I should not run in the other direction. That those things don't happen. So Cannon said that our emotions are not distinct enough for us to see that what we are perceiving are different emotions. We cannot tell that we are afraid or we are guilty or we are shameful. These will be different things happening. Bart expanded on this idea, but by stating that the sensory information that comes into the brain is sent simultaneously to both cortex and the organs of the sympathetic nervous system. Cannon-Bart theory of emotion. The fear and the bodily reactions are therefore experienced at the same time, not one after the other. I'm afraid and running and aroused. I'm looking at the growling dog and then I'm running, and at the same time I'm experiencing that my heart rate is increasing. It is not happening one after the other. It's happening simultaneously as I'm experiencing the event. This theory is known as Cannon-Bart theory of emotion. But this theory also had its critic. Lange stated that the thalamus would have to be pretty sophisticated to make sense of all possible human emotions and relate them to the proper areas of cortex and body. What he meant is that for our brain to be this much sophisticated that we will be able to make sense of whatever we are feeling in that moment, it would be it would not be very easy for our brain to do that. So this theory does not make sense, because for us to be able to perceive all emotions and then to understand them and then to react would be something that is not possible. But also it would seem that other areas of the brain must be involved in processing emotions. It is not just the cortex, it is not just the sympathetic nervous system that will be working. It will be other parts of the brain will be involved in the processing of emotions as well. The studies of people with spinal cord injuries, which we talked about before, appears to suggest that emotions can be experienced without feedback from the sympathetic organs to the cortex, and were cited as a criticism of the James Lange theory. But it seemed that Cannon-Bart theory was supported by this, but people do not need feedback from organs to experience emotions. If someone is having spinal cord injury, that does not mean that that person cannot experience emotion. This was the criticism of James Lange theory, and it seemed that Cannon-Bart's theory would be supported by it, but it is not, because we do not need feedback from certain organs to experience emotion. We can experience emotions even without feedback from certain organs. That's why people with spinal cord injuries can experience emotions without feedback from the organs that are experiencing the event. There's an alternate pathway that does provide feedback from these organs to the cortex, that is the vagus nerve, one of the cranial nerves. The existence of the vagus nerve and the cranial nerve makes case for the Cannon-Bart theory little less convincing. Any doubt till now? Okay, I hope you are understanding what I'm trying to say.
Yes, one thing, madam,
Yes.
this unit 4 has not been taught to the class. You know that central nervous system and sympathetic nervous system, peripheral, has not been taught to the class.
Okay.
Therefore, the students will not be able to relate to what I was talking mostly, because the brain thing is coming in unit 4.
Okay.
Subject. So most of us have not gone through the unit 4. It's been taught, not taught. Therefore, when we talk of this, all this, limbic system, hypothalamus, all these things generally looks gray in our mind.
Okay. Then we'll go about it in the simple way. We'll not talk about the technical terms here, not taking the technical terms of sympathetic.
You might touch upon something like that part is responsible for that. This part is responsible for that. So a brief description will suffice us to know what is all this CNS and all PNS all about.
Okay. I'll just look into it if I can give you a brief introduction into parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system.
Thank you.
Just give me one moment. Okay, just a very brief thing about the brain mechanisms. See, there are different parts of the brain, and there are different ways that our body reacts. So there are two types of nerves: parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves. Uh, will not go in detail about what those things are, but we'll just see how they function. So the parasympathetic nervous, they are the ones that allows us to rest, and the sympathetic ones are the one that lead to the fight or the flight mechanism. It means that the sympathetic nervous system is the one that is defining how we are responding in a stressful situation. Either we'll run away or we'll fight that. How we'll fight that? Physiologically, heart rate will be increasing, pupils will be dilated, more air will be passing into our lungs, there will be rapid breathing, bladder control will be there, there will be, you know, and sympathetic nervous system is the opposite of that, that there will be, our pupils will be constricted, will have more saliva in our mouth, heart rate will be slow, airways or lungs would be constricted, and stomach activity would be stimulated, bladder will be contracted. So these are some basic differences between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. What you have to understand for understanding theories of emotion is that our sympathetic nervous system will be more functioning because it will allow us to either fight or flight in the situation. So it will allow us to react in a stressful situation according to our own individualities. Does that address your concern?
Yes, to a certain extent, madam.
Okay. I think we should just focus on theories of emotion, because if you go into the talking about brain and its various functions, that will take whole another hour or two. So we'll just restrict ourselves to theories of emotions. And if you have any doubts about any word, then I'll explain it further, because it is very important that you understand the physiology of emotions as well. So starting again, we'll be talking about Stature-Singer theory of emotion. Stanley Stature and Jerome Singer carried out the aforementioned adrenaline study, which we mentioned in the James Lange theory, the criticism of that some people were injected with adrenaline, and we could see that cognitive prompts were there that led to certain experiences of emotions, but not all emotions were experienced, even though adrenaline was injected into people. So Singer and Satcher worked on this study and thereby came up with this two-factor theory of emotion in 1964, which is called the cognitive arousal theory as well. They proposed that two things happen before emotion occurs: the physiological arousal and a labeling of the arousal based on cues from the surrounding environment. These two things happen at the same time, result in the labeling of emotion. So example of the barking dog. A dog is growling. My heart rate is increasing. So I'll attribute that okay, my heart rate is increasing. I am being scared of the dog. So my emotion will be of afraid. I'm being afraid. For example, if a person comes across a snarling dog while taking a walk, the physical arousal, heart racing, eyes opening wide, is accompanied by the thought or the cognition that this must be fear. This cannot be any other emotion. This is fear. Only then I will experience the fear emotion. In other words, I am aroused in the presence of a scary dog. Therefore, I must be afraid. As you can see in the picture, a dog is growling, heart rate is increasing. There is cognitive labeling of the emotion. Okay, this is scary. This is making my heart jump. I am now scared. That is my emotion. My emotion is of fear. This theory also had its critics. Criticism of this theory came from studies showing that emotions can be modulated even when an individual is not able to make a conscious cognitive or attribution of the stimulus. So for example, again, the example of the barking dog. What if I am frozen on the spot? What if I am not able to understand what I'm experiencing? I go numb, my hands are not working. I'm just stuck in the spot and I don't know what to do. Does that mean that I'm not experiencing emotion? No, it cannot mean that. So just because cognitive labeling is there does not mean that emotion is being experienced. Without cognitive labeling, also emotions can be experienced. A study by William Kunst and Wilson, Robert Zanuck found that participants could form effective discrimination of stimuli even when they were unable to guess what the stimulus was at a better rate than chance. This showed that the cognitive attribution could still form an emotionally loaded attribution of a stimulus, even when the context and environment don't consciously indicate how this attribution should be made. For example, even when I'm frozen on the spot by looking at a growling dog, and I can feel myself that tears are trickling down my eyes, and but I'm not able to understand, okay, I should run in the other direction or I'm afraid. That does not mean that I'm not experiencing the emotion.
Ma'am, I have a doubt. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, suppose if there's no previous experience that a dog is harmful, like we should get scared of a dog. A person seeing a dog may not have a cognitive labeling that I have to get scared and run, right?
Yeah.
So how those are, like, how do we explain those things?
So in that case, see, we are taking dog as an example. Suppose there's a snake. Are you afraid of a snake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Suppose if it's poisonous, yes. If I can differentiate, it's non-poisonous, no.
So suppose you see a poisonous snake poisoning snake slithering down the road, and you're in front of it, and it's just heading towards you.
Yeah. Because I know it's scary that a poisonous snake's bite might kill me. That emotion is conveyed. Suppose if we don't, according to this theory, it's like already known information only can give you the cognitive labeling, right? It means that only, right?
Yeah. See, if you're not scared of a dog, if I'm very friendly with the dog, I will not be afraid. Obviously, even if a dog is running and growling, I'll not be afraid. But when we already know how we perceive things. Then we'll obviously cognitively label that emotion easily, much more easily than being uninformed about how we are feeling in that particular moment.
So if there is no cognitive label, then there wouldn't be an emotion very specific to that?
Yeah, but that is what the criticism of this theory is. That cognitive labeling is not necessary to experience an emotion.
Okay.
That even without cognitive labeling, we can experience an emotion. Like we are seeing, for example, if you see any animal that you have not seen before, or if you're in a situation that you have not been before, that does not mean that you will not experience an emotion for that moment, right?
For anxiety or anything of the new situation, uncertainty.
Okay. So emotions will be there. That does not mean that you should have a cognitive label for it.
Okay.
So this was the criticism of this theory.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Because this talked specifically about cognitive or attribution of emotion, which is not always possible for humans. Moving on. Richard Lazarus' theory of emotion. One of the modern versions of cognitive emotion theories is Lazarus' meditational theory of emotion. In this theory, the most important aspect of any emotional experience is how the person interprets or appraises the stimulus that causes the emotional reaction. To meditate means to come. Can you please switch off your audio because my screen is not otherwise visible to me? Video is being shown for 2 people. Okay, anyway. So the meditational theory of emotion given by Lazarus. In this theory, to mediate I'm sorry, mediational theory, not the meditate. I'm sorry. To mediate means to come between. And in this theory, the cognitive appraisal mediates by coming between the stimulus and the emotional response to that stimulus. So there will be a stimulus, there will be appraisal of a stimulus, there will be motivational response, physiological response, and then the experience of emotion. Okay, anyway. So this is the mediational theory of emotion. Important aspect is how a person interprets or appraises the stimulus that causes the emotional reaction. So in any situation, how am I interpreting that? What is my we'll just go back to what we were discussing before, that I see a dog. I am not afraid of the dog. Why will I run, or why will I get scared or feel an emotion of fear? So here the motivational response is mediating how I'm experiencing any emotion related to that particular moment. You can very well see how this connects to what we were just discussing.
So it is similar to the last theory, like cognitive labeling, and what we think and perceive, that comes to the emotion.
Yeah, that theory talked about cognitive appraisal of the theory, a cognitive appraisal of emotion or cognitive labeling of emotion. What this says is there will be mediation between the appraisal and the experience of emotion based on our interpretation, which was the criticism of previous theory, that when I'm looking at a dog who's growling, the physiological response will only occur when I know that how I'm perceiving the situation. I'm not scared of the dog, so why will my heart rate increase, or why will I get dry mouth, right?
Oh.
So for example, remember the person who encountered a snarling dog while walking down the neighborhood? According to Lazarus, the appraisal of situation would come between both the physical arousal and the experience of emotion. If the dog is behind a sturdy fence, the appraisal would be something like no threat. The most likely emotion would be annoyance. The physical arousal would be minimal, but if the dog is not confined, the appraisal would more likely be danger, threatening animal, which will be followed by increase in arousal and emotional experience of fear. So what is very important to see here is that Lazarus talked about there will be mediation between our physiological arousal and our experience of emotion, and that will be by how we are appraising the situation. If a dog is growling and you're afraid of the dog, but the dog is behind a fence, you will not experience the emotion of fear, because you will be able to see that, okay, this dog cannot harm me, or this animal cannot harm me. In other words, it is the interpretation of the arousal that results in the emotion of fear, not the labeling, as in Stature-Singer model. The interpretation comes first. Again, going back to what we discussed, the interpretation comes first, not the labeling. I'll not see, okay, I'm experiencing fear, so I should run. No, it will be first, even whether I'm afraid or not, whether the situation requires my experience of fear or not, that will come first. My interpretation of the situation will come first before how I respond to the situation. But this theory also had its critics. Not everyone agrees with these theories, of course. Some researchers believe that emotional reactions to situations are so fast that they are almost instantaneous, which would leave little time for cognitive appraisal to occur first. Others have found that human brain can respond to a physical threat before conscious thought enters the picture. And the amygdala can prompt emotional reaction before we are consciously aware of what we are responding to. What this means that so suppose I'm walking down the street and animal just comes running. I will not think whether I'm scared right now. I will not see whether my heart rate is increasing. I'll just run in the opposite direction as fast as possible. So this was a criticism of Richard Lazarus theory, that our responses are sometimes so fast that we cannot see what we are feeling in that moment to experience the emotion. We just respond. We leave no time for cognitive appraisal.
Yes, madam, this is regarding amygdala response are quick and faster, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That means that is faster than all these processes of the information going in the brain.
Yeah.
So that is why sometimes it is so faster. That is a criticism Lazarus theory.
Yeah,
Right?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. The criticism is that sometimes we are not consciously aware of what we are responding to. We are not able to label the emotion. We are not able to cognitively appraise the situation. We just respond. It's just flight of fight mechanism at that time. You see a dog, you will just run in the other direction. No cognitive appraisal of that emotion at that time. I'm just taking an example of a dog. Don't mind that. You can just picture any other animal or any other thing that you're afraid of and then understand what we are talking about. And also we're using the example of dogs because psychologists have majorly worked on how humans react to basic life situations, which majorly involve dogs. Now we'll be talking about Linsley theory of emotion. It is somewhat different from all other theories of emotion because this has a very very technical terms involved in it, which will be relating to brain. Linsley activation theory of emotion retains the basic framework of Cannon-Bard. What was Cannon-Bard's theory? Can anyone tell me?
Stimulus, physiological response, and then emotion.
Yes. Yes. Are you sure? Okay, we'll just go back.
Yeah.
That's fine. Stimulus, physiological response, and emotion, but all occurring at the same time. This is an important factor, occurring at the same time. Okay, so Linsley activation theory of emotion retains the basic framework of the Cannon-Bard theory, but expands it to include the reticular activating system, which is what we'll talk about in the next slide. The theory relates not only to emotional but also to cortical arousal, sleep, wakefulness, and certain types of abnormal behavior. Activation theory is based on the concept of activation level, defined here as the degree of neural activity in the reticular activation system, a major part of the CNS. So, very technical terms here, reticular activation system, what is that? I'm sure you must be asking. So this is the reticular activation system. See, the part of the brain that has, you can see it's expanded. Neurons are like, neurons in an area are constructed in an area very, very tightly. That is the reticular activation system. And it majorly is involved in this Linsley theory. So Linsley theory is based on the following experimental evidence. The electroencephalogram shows an activation pattern in emotion. Cortical activation can be evoked by stimulation of the brainstem, reticular formation. Deconstruction of the rostral end of the reticular system abolishes cortical activation and leads to apathy, somnolence. The reticular activation system, which can arouse the cortex, is either identical with or overlaps the mechanism whose downward discharge causes the motor activity of emotional expression. Now, I'm sure this seems very foreign and very alien to all of you. Even to me, it seems, because this involves very technical terms, but we'll not go by the technical terms. We'll try to understand it in a very basic way, that there is a system in the brain called a reticular activation system. And what Lensley said that yes, there will be physiological response. Yes, there will be experience of emotion and occurring at the same time, but different areas of brain will be involved. And what those areas are, that is the reticular activation system. So when we are experiencing any emotion, there are certain patterns in our brain. So those are evoked by by the brainstem reticular formation. And deconstruction of the rostral end, or rostral here means like the beak-like end of the reticular system, abolishes cortical activation, leads to apathy or somnolence. That means that deconstruction of the beak end of the reticular system. So you can see in the picture that the reticular activation system is all over the brain. You can see the arrows in the first image. That is the RAS, is the reticular system. See, you're able to see, right? So when this does not function, a person can feel emotions like apathy. They cannot relate to any circumstances. They cannot feel any emotions. So this is very important in experiencing of emotion according to Linsley. Activation theory has been used to explain the effects of variation in task design on responses of task performers, but little empirical research has evaluated activation theory utility as a task design theory. This shortage of research may be due to a belief that activation theories allows only vague prediction and does not consider effect of individual differences in explaining task characteristics, task responses, relationships. So the criticism of Linsley theory is that these are vague predictions and they do not consider individual differences. How differently a person who has, let's say, a brain injury responds to a situation that Linsley has not considered. He has just said that reticular activation system will be activated and that will lead to our physiological response and experience of emotion. But he has not considered how different people will react to different circumstances. So these are the theory of emotions. Any doubt till now? Any doubt? Anything that you would like me to explain again?
The last donor Linsley once more because it's a little confusing.
Okay. So don't go by the technical terms. Just try to understand what Linsley was trying to say. So Linsley activation theory of emotion, it retains the basic framework of Cannon-Bart theory. Cannon-Bart's theory was that we see a stimulus, we'll have a physiological response as well as an emotional response to the event, and that will happen simultaneously. They will not be happening one after the other. That was Cannon-Bart's theory, right?
Yes.
So what Linsley said is that this is what is happening. There will be a simultaneous experience of the emotion, but it will include reticular activating system. Just this thing.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then the description of RAS is very complex, but the theory is like simultaneously physiological arousal and emotion due to the functioning of RAS.
Yes, exactly. So this theory is not only related to emotion. If even in motivation, you'll read about this theory. This is also related to our sleep wakefulness or certain types of abnormal behavior, because this is considering different parts of the brain. So how the neural activity is happening in the reticular activation system, that is considered very much in this theory. So how our brain is being activated by different emotions, he considered that and included that in with Cannon-Bart's theory and came up with this new theory of emotion. And how the brain will be activated, that can be seen through an electroencephalogram. The activation pattern can be seen through that. And what it means is even when RAS is not activated, when it's not functioning, it can lead to a certain emotions like apathy in a person. So a person may not be able to experience emotion if the reticular activating system is not functioning properly. So, and the criticism of this theory is that he did not take into account the individual differences, people having brain injury, people having different neural networks. They may react to different situations differently, irrespective of how their RAS is reticular activation system is, how much activated that is. So people can react differently, but Linsley did not consider that in explaining the theory. So that is a criticism of this theory. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now we'll be talking about role of physiology in emotion.
Ma'am, excuse me, sorry to disturb.
Yeah.
Ma'am, is this James Lange theory and what you explained of this Stature-Singer theory, it's almost like same, no? Because when the stimulus is same, the first response is fear. And then the second response is arousal. No? So what is that major difference between the James Lange theory and the Stature-Singer's?
See, Stature-Singer theory is a two-factor theory. James Lange theory only talks about stimulus, physiological response, and then the emotion. What Stature-Singer have included is cognitive labeling of the emotion.
Okay. Yes.
So this is a two-factor theory. There are two things involved, and that was just a one-factor theory, although they did not name it so, but we can say it for our convenience.
Yeah. So James theory is one factor theory.
Yeah, but yeah, this is for a convenience. They did not name it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
This is a two-factor theory, Stature-Singer theory. Cognitive labeling along with physiological responses, and then the experience of emotion.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other doubt? So I'll be moving to role of physiology in emotions. First of all, emotional processing and the brain. Physically, when a person experiences an emotion, an arousal is created by the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight mechanism. Although facial experiences do differ among emotional responses, emotions are difficult to distinguish from one another based on the basis of physiological reactions alone. However, in the laboratory, we can use devices to measure heart rate, BP, skin temperatures, and researchers have found that different emotions may be associated with different physiological reactions. What this means is, again, the example of dog, a growling dog or an aggressive dog running on the street just in front of me, example. So at that time, I will not be able to distinguish my emotion. So if I'm not scared of dogs, I'll not be able to distinguish my emotions based on my physical. I cannot say that, okay, my heart rate is increasing, so I must be afraid. Okay, my heart rate is increasing, maybe I'm excited to meet the dog. I cannot say that. Emotions cannot lead to cannot be distinguished based on the physiological reactions alone. Based on my bodily reactions, I cannot tell which emotions am I feeling. Although this has been studied in labs based on various devices, heart rate, BP, skin temperatures, all have been studied. And different emotions are associated with different physiological reactions, but emotions cannot be distinguished just on the basis of physiological reactions alone. Do you get it?
Yes.
Okay. The amygdala, a small area located within the limbic system on each side of the brain, is associated with emotions such as fear and pleasure in both human and animals, and it is also involved in the facial expression of emotion. So you can see in the picture that this is the amygdala, and this is a very important organ that is related to how we are perceiving the situation. Fear or pleasure, or even our facial expressions. We put a smile, we are sad. All this has been related to amygdala in various researches. Besides the amygdala, there are other areas of the brain that are involved in processing of information, emotional information. Research suggests that emotions may work differently depending on which side of the brain is involved. One area of investigation has been the frontal lobe. Researchers have found that positive emotions are associated with left frontal lobe of the brain, whereas negative feelings such as sadness, anxiety, depression seem to be function of the right frontal lobe. So many people have worked on how our brain perceives different different emotions, and it has been found that there are different areas of the brain relating to each and every emotion. So for example, positive emotions such as happiness or giddiness or other happy emotions, they are associated with the left side of the brain. Okay, and negative feelings such as anxiety, depression, sadness, they have been associated with the right frontal lobe. Frontal lobe means the forward part of the brain. Okay. In studies in which the electrical activity of the brain has been tracked using an electroencephalogram, left frontal lobe activation has been associated with pleasant emotions, while the right frontal lobe activity has been associated with negative emotional states. Again, the left frontal lobe, which is this far side of the brain, or you can check for yourself, which is left, this has been associated with pleasant emotions, like good emotions, emotions of happiness, emotion of being happy, being proud, being, you know, general happiness state. And negative side of the brain can be related to, again, sadness, anxiety, depression. Negative frontal lobe, that is, not just, don't just say negative side of the brain as like me. The right frontal lobe has been associated with negative emotions. Furthermore, increased left frontal lobe activity has been found in individuals trained in meditation. And for the participant in this study, greater left frontal lobe activity was accompanied by a reduction in their anxiety as well a boost in their immune system. So some studies were done on individuals who were trained in meditation, and it was found that greater left frontal lobe activity was accompanied. So left frontal lobe activity means more negative, more positive emotions, more pleasant emotions, more happy emotions. They were found much more in people who practice meditation, and it was seen that it led to a reduction in their anxiety. So the right part of the brain, right frontal lobe, the activity in that was seen as decreasing. As well, there was a boost in their immune system. So this is something that you can even see in your daily life. So not see the brain activity, but you can check that when you practice things like meditation or like you exercise, you feel much more happy. And you can always tell that that is associated with left frontal lobe of the brain, because its activity has been increased and the right frontal lobe activity has been decreased. So you'll feel less anxiety and more happiness. The ability to interpret the facial expressions of others as a particular emotion also seems to be a function of one side of the brain more than the other. Different brain areas take primary roles based on different ways you try to control your emotions, but there is a degree of overlap across several of the strategies. For example, some common strategies for regulating one's emotions include distraction, reappraisal, controlling the influence of emotion on decision making. All these strategies take advantage of the lateral prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate cortex, and the amygdala also comes into play. What this means is we have different facial expressions. We have facial expressions for sadness, for happiness, for shame, guilt, anger. So different sides of the brain are functioning on how our facial expressions are happening and how we are interpreting those. And we cannot just say that this part of the brain is the one that is regulating our emotions. Different parts of the brain, they work together, they sometimes overlap each other in our experiencing of the emotion. And some common strategies for regulating emotions can be like distracting you. So if I'm feeling angry, I can look at a book, or I can listen to music and distract myself. So these kind of activities, they influence on how our emotions are played in our daily life. And different areas of the brain are involved in how we formulate those strategies, how we go about, how we accept those strategies, how we perceive things, and how we express our emotions. Now talking about the physiological changes during emotions. The most obvious signs of emotional arousal involve changes in the visceral or the autonomic system. Again, this will be something new for you. I'll try to check if I can explain autonomic system. Any doubts till now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so autonomic nervous system actually is a component of the peripheral nervous system. Again, that is something that you don't know. It regulates the physiological processes, including our heart rate, our blood pressure, respiration, digestion, sexual arousal. And this can be divided into sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems. Okay, so autonomic is the bigger term for sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. So obviously, emotional arousal has the involvement of autonomic nervous system. Increase or decrease. So autonomic nervous system means increase or decrease in heart rate. So parasympathetic nervous system would be like increase in heart rate, and sympathetic would be decrease in, oh sorry, other way around. Parasympathetic would be decrease in heart rate and sympathetic would be increase in heart rate. These are the part of autonomic nervous system divided into two, parasympathetic and sympathetic. So sympathetic is the flight and flight, which means increase in heart rate, dry mouth, increase in blood pressure. So autonomic nervous system regulates our emotional activity. So increase or decrease in heart rate, cutaneous blood flow, piloerection, sweating, gastrointestinal motility can accompany various emotions. These responses are brought about by changes in activity in the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric components of the visceral motor system, which govern smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands throughout the body. Don't go by the technical terms here. Just try to understand that various organs, various systems are involved in how we are experiencing emotions. So what you need to understand is the autonomic nervous system, which has two parts, parasympathetic and uh, sympathetic nervous system. They are both involved in how we are experiencing an emotion. So they can be increase in heart rate, they can be decrease in heart rate, they can be increase in blood pressure, they can be uh, different physiological things that we are feeling in the moment. So those are all defining how we are experiencing the emotions. And various parts of the body are involved in that. Our brain is involved in that. So emotion is not a solitary experience. Our body, our brain is involved in experience of emotion. That is what you need to understand. So William James, who was a proponent of the James Lange theory, he said, what kind of an emotion of fear would be left if the feeling neither of quickened heartbeats, nor of shallow breathing, neither of trembling lips, nor of weakened limbs, neither of goose flesh, nor of visceral stirring were present? It is quite impossible for me to think. I say that for us, emotion dissociated from all bodily feeling is inconceivable. What he is saying is that we cannot separate emotions from physiological arousal. We cannot separate emotions from how our body is reacting, how our mind is reacting, how our brain is reacting to it. Understood? Okay. So physiological changes during emotion. The experience of emotion is associated with a variety of bodily changes, both overt and covert. Overt physical manifestations of emotions are apparent and observable, but the covert organic changes are detected only by special procedures and modern recording devices, including computers. So overt experience of emotions means something that we can see, it's something that we can observe. And covert means something that is not detectable physically, but can be detected through modern devices now. So for example, uh, overt can be eyes widening or the play of a smile. face becoming red with excitement or anger, pupils are dilated, respiration becomes rapid, electrical resistance of the skin. This you cannot measure, but this is a covert experience of emotion. This is not some electrical resistance of the skin is not something that we can observe, but it is something that can be recorded through modern devices. So this is an covert experience of emotion. All bodily changes during emotions result from several complex underlying processes originating and integrated by the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine glands, and the cerebrospinal system. These internal reactions are pretty complex and challenging to measure. The outward bodily changes include changes in facial expression, vocal expression, sweating on the body surface, accelerated motor activities. The internal physiological changes involve changes in the electrical activities of the skin, respiratory movements, blood pressure, pulse rate, sweat glands, reaction of the endocrine glands, and the chemical activities of the blood. So what you should try to understand here is that a lot of systems are involved in how we are experiencing an emotion. As I've already told you, the autonomic nervous system is involved, which has two components, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So body can experience the emotion both inside and outside as well. So the outward expression would be the facial expression, changes in voice tone, sweating, or fingers tingling, or the nervous tapping of the foot. That can be an outward expression of emotion. The internal can be electrical activities of the skin, or how our areolas are expanding or constructing in the lung, or the pulse rate is increasing or decreasing. So these are basic outward and inward expression of emotions that are happening in all our bodies at all the times. So external changes during emotions. We face many emotions in our daily lives, and it is not something that we can run away from. So it is very much important that we recognize that what are the different changes that happen while we are experiencing an emotion. So the voice changes according to the type of emotions. Experiments have proved that emotions can be identified based on voice. So right now, if my voice is quivering, that means maybe I'm nervous to say it out loud. Maybe I'm nervous to present. So you can detect the emotion based on the voice tone, based on the voice timbre, facial expression change. We can locate the expression experienced by a person by looking at his or her face. So when you're looking at any other person, you can tell, okay, this person is angry, this person is happy, this person is sad. There will be changes in the body language, like the stiffness of muscles, twisting of fingers, movement of legs and hands. Whenever you're observing any person, and that person has put his or her fist like this, you can always tell that, okay, this person must be getting angry. So these little external changes, they allow us to perceive emotion, they allow us to interpret emotion, they also allow us to experience emotion on our own. External and other changes can be sweating, wrinkles on the forehead, redness of eye, erection of hair on the skin, like getting goosebumps, that can also be an emotion. Internal changes during emotion. Many internal changes take place during emotion. These internal changes are the result of stimulation by the autonomic nervous system. Adrenaline gets circulated all over the body and stimulate vital organs, leading to following internal changes. So as I already told you, the autonomic nervous system is involved in how we are experiencing emotions, and that leads to many changes inside our bodies. It can lead to hormonal changes. It can lead to secretion of various neurotransmitters or various hormones, and that will allow us to experience emotions differently. So increase in heart rate, thereby increase in BP, increase in rate of respiration, increase in blood sugar level, decrease in the function of gastrointestinal tract. That is why we do not experience the feeling of hunger during emotional stages. Changes in frequency of brain waves, dilation of pupil, decreased secretion of saliva and dryness of the mouth, After the emergency or emotion situation is over, the next step is to restore the energy spent during emotion. This work is carried by parasympathetic nervous system. So whenever we are experiencing any emotion, suppose you're in a stressful situation, you see an animal which you're scared of, and that animal is chasing you, is being aggressive, you start running in the other direction. Your parasympathetic nervous system would be activated, which is your flight or fight mechanism. So in that case, you will be having increased heart rate, your rate of respiration will be increased, blood sugar level will be increased, there will be decrease in stomach activities. That is why in during stressful situation, we do not sometimes feel hungry. We do not feel the feeling of hunger. Your pupils will be dilated, or dry mouth experience will be there. So these things happen when we are in an emotionally stressful situation. And once this situation gets over, the next step for our body is to restore the energy that was spent experiencing that emotion. That was, for example, while if you see an animal walking towards you, if you are stressed in that situation, if you are afraid in that situation, if you experience fear in that situation, after that situation is over, your body's next step would be to restore the energy that was spent. And that work will be carried out by the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, which will lead to decrease in heart rate, more saliva in mouth, decrease in respiration rate. You'll feel hungry again. You'll experience your eyes will get relaxed, your body will get relaxed. So these are the internal changes that can happen during emotions, while experiencing emotions, and as well as after the emotional experience is over. Any questions?
No.
Yes, madam. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
This is regarding one question. Like you have described the internal changes, external changes due to this all these activities. This leads to another subject of study in psychology, the disorders.
I'm sorry.
So many disorders, anxiety disorders,
Yeah.
Some disorders are also there. Any disorder can be diagnosed after assessment with these emotional disturbances through different tests of effect on emotions and internally, externally.
Okay.
Can any disorder be assessed or diagnosed through the effect of emotions?
Okay. See, diagnosis can only be done there. You know about DSM-5 and ICD-10, right?
Yes, yes.
So diagnosis has criteria. Although emotions play a major part in how we go about the diagnosis, it cannot be done specifically based on internal changes or external changes during emotions. They play a major part. Yes, they will be assessed by scales and assessment tests that are there, but emotions alone cannot lead to a diagnosis of any disorder.
Okay, thank you.
Now we have, I think, about 20 minutes. So please ask any questions that you have. And you can also ask me to repeat anything that you have not understood till now.
Can you answer the previous classes, in questions?
I don't know, but
just one class before, there is something called emotional intelligence,
okay.
IQ and EQ. That was not touched upon large by previous professor because of lack of time. Nowadays, EQ takes priority over IQ tests. So that's why a lot of organizations based on EQ. Now, can you tell me what sort of techniques used in EQ?
What sort of techniques?
Used in EQ.
I cannot tell you. See, I have not studied about this topic, so I'll not say that I'm saying anything 100% correct, but I can only touch what I think about this. So EQ, see, EQ is a very new terminology in psychology. It's not very old. IQ has been there since like 1900s. EQ has only come up in the last, I think, 2-3 decades. So assessment of EQ, as you can see, when we go for SSB, when we go for exams that are about, testing your resilience, your strength, your uh, emotional state. In those exams, there are certain assessments that are testing your emotional question, which means that they are testing how you respond to any situation that is stressful, any situation that is disrupting to your normal routine, any situation that is not something that you're familiar with. So in your daily life also, you can see that EQ can be assessed based on how we respond to any kinds of situation that is not familiar for us, that is not easy for us, or that is out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. Correct. I agree with you.
Hmm.
But see, nowadays, so many enrollment takes place. Recruitment takes place based on EQ or based on motivation measurements techniques also. Am I clear, madam?
Yeah.
Motivational measurement techniques. Now, what happens? A lot of smart people who have gone through, the psychology studies, all the studies of different psychology, they try to improve upon their EQ or motivation measurements. Is it possible? And if possible, what level?
I think it is always possible to improve your EQ because we as humans are always growing through learning, right?
Yeah.
We learn in different situations. We learn according to our experiences.
Because today all the students are studying psychology. They have something to look forward, like a job or something. Now the present environment in the country and abroad, the psychology got a vast area of employment. Okay, so there all these tests come in techniques, techniques of recruitment, HR. So there they do this all motivational measurement, EQ test. One of the thing is that they'll just tell you, write a short story on based on something. So that gives you everything, motivational aspect, emotional aspect, everything they give it to you. Yeah. So that is how they assess it, individual.
Yeah.
So, but can you feign it? Can you improve upon these qualities which you are inherent supposed to with you? Can you improve upon this EQ and motivational aspects?
Yes, I definitely think that you can always improve the EQ aspect of your behavior, of your emotional state by, EQ basically, as we said, emotional question, intelligence, IQ, EI. It's something that has to do with our growth.
Okay, thank you.
How we are trying to grow in life. So if you have, suppose you have taken any motivational assessment test, you have taken any EQ test, and you have not performed well in it, when you're coming out of that exam, how do you now go about your failure? Do you think that, okay, I've failed, I'm not a good person, I'm not a worthy person, this makes me, this makes me a miserable person? Do you think like that, or do you think that, okay, even if I failed, I'll try again, I'll try to improvise, I'll try to learn? That is the EQ, because you are able to assess any situation and you are able to learn something out of it and grow individually. So that is EQ for me. And that is how EQ works also. Because in any emotional state, in any behavioral state, you're able to take something out of the experience, and you're able to apply it in your daily life, and you're able to grow in regard to that situation. So even after failure, if you're not quitting, if you're resilient, if you are going for growth, then you have high EQ. And if you're failing one time, you'll definitely pass again, because your EQ will be increasing, definitely.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Okay. Any other question? Anything that I can repeat again? Any theory? Any doubts?
Can you suggest few good books to refer? International authors or anything, so where we can go back and read standard books which can be read for.
Okay. You have access to Introduction to Psychology books, I'm sure.
Yeah, actually, for social psychology, I was reading a book by David Myers. I liked it a lot. So something like that for introduction for principles of psychology or any other topic where we can have a broader perspective of the subject.
Okay, so introduction to psychology, there are many books for introduction to psychology that talk about the general principles. You'll find emotion, motivation, and everything there.
Yeah.
There is Cicerelli.
Can you spell it? Baron?
Yeah, Baron.
Yeah. And?
Cicerelli, you can see the spelling Ciccarelli.
Okay.
There is Richard Morgan.
Okay, Morgan, yeah.
Morgan is there. And then Atkinson and Hilgards is there. These are good books. Cicerelli I find very good because it explains in details. And Baron is very basic but very good for a general knowledge of the psychology.
Okay. Okay. Actually, a biology background. So, like, I've been used to of reading in books and other authors. So, this material of a university is good, but I was trying to find a international author where I can refer and all. So, I wanted to.
Definitely start by reading Baron. That will give you a general perspective of the various topics that are covered in psychology.
Yeah. But
after that, you can read Cicerelli. You can read about different topics like individually, social psychology, developmental psychology.
Yeah.
Up to you. But general perception you can get from Baron, Cicerelli, Atkinson, Morgan.
Morgan. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else that I can repeat or explain again? Any theory? Would you like me to summarize the theory once again? Just
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So again, the introduction talked about the different emotions, the definition of emotions that involve physiological changes, thoughts, and outward expression. And why we are reading the theories is because we are trying to see what came first, the chick or the egg, in respect to emotions, the thought, the physiological arousal, or the behavior, which came first. So James and Lange, they said that there will be physiological response, and then there will be the experience of emotion. So they talked about this will happen one after the other, not together. So you'll see a dog, your heart rate will increase, and then you'll experience fear. So this was James Lange theory. Obviously, critics were there. We'll not go into that. Cannon and Bart said that there will be a stimulus, there will be a dog who will be barking, but you will feel your heart rate increase at the same time as you are feeling afraid, that you will start running and your heart rate will increase. So this will happen simultaneously, not one after the other, as James and Lange said. Stature single theory, remember this as the two-factor theory. What they have done is they have added another component, which is the cognitive labeling of emotion. So if my heart rate is increasing, I'm labeling it as that, okay, I am scared of the situation. So now my emotion will be fear. So there are two components involved, that is the physiological arousal as well as the cognitive labeling of the situation that will lead to experience of emotion. So this is a two-factor theory. Lazarus now included something very different from the previous researchers. He included something called motivational response. That means a mediation will be there between how we are appraising the situation and what our physiological response will be. So if I'm looking at the dog growling, but I'm not scared of the dog and the dog is behind a fence, so why will my heart rate increase? Why will I experience an emotion of fear? So what he said is how we are appraising the situation is defining how we are reacting to it. So if a dog is barking at me from inside the home, I will not be scared. I will not experience the emotion of fear. So this was Donald Lensley. He talked about basically the Cannon-Bart's theory that there will be simultaneous reaction and physiological arousal, but he added something to that, which is the reticular activation system. Okay. So one more thing that you have to see that in Cannon-Bart's theory, the thalamus has been defined, but not a reticular activation system. So that is also a major difference between Cannon-Bart and Linsley's theory. That in Cannon-Bart, he said that only thalamus will be included in how we are perceiving the situation. But what Linsley said was reticular activation system is also involved. So these are the 5 theories that we have learned today. Then the emotional processing of the brain, which basically summarized as different people experience different emotions differently, and not all emotions can be, checked physically, and not just on the basis of physiological reactions alone. Just because my heart rate is increasing does not mean that I will be afraid. Maybe I'm excited. So different areas of the brain are involved in how we are perceiving the emotions. So major of that is amygdala, which is involved in our fear and pleasure, and also facial expression. Other areas are also involved. And the left side of the brain is associated with positive feelings, and the negative part of the negative frontal lobe, part of negative emotions are associated with right frontal lobe. So and as I told you, autonomic nervous system is involved, and it has 2 components, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is the one that is allowing us to relax, and sympathetic is the one which is allowing us the fight or flight mechanism, which is either to run or to fight. So based on that, the body will react. Parasympathetic will involve like relaxation of the body, and sympathetic will involve excitement in the body, like heart rate increasing, respiration rate increasing. You can tell like pupil dilation and all. And there are internal and external changes during emotions, voice change, facial expression change, and tone change. Overt and covert expression of emotions is there. Overt is the one that we can observe and see, and covert is the one that is not physically observable, but that is happening inside and can be measured through modern devices and all. So that is a summarization of the topics today. Any questions again?
No, ma'am, it was clear. Thank you.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So I would like to tell you a few things about emotions as well. That obviously different people experience emotions differently. Researchers have found that our culture has a major role in how we are experiencing the emotions and how we are labeling the emotion. Culture is involved, as well as gender, our ethnicity. All these things play a major part in our emotional appraisal, in our emotional labeling. So not just the physiology that is involved in experience of emotions, it is also the socio-cultural factors that are present in our surrounding that will allow us to experience different emotions differently. So always keep that in mind, that these theory talk about physiology a lot. Cultural components are also there in experience of emotions.
Excuse me, ma'am. I have a question. Is that which type of patients do we deal with this kind of theories? Which type of patients do we treat with these theories?
Okay, see, you don't treat people with theories of anything. What these theories are, they are important for understanding how the research have happened over time and how people have tried to understand emotions. So now we understand emotions as a culmination of many factors, cultural factors, physiological factors, mental factors. But the research happened in such way that there was a very basic understanding of emotions. But a lot of criticism came for each theory, so we expanded our understanding to what we now understand. But these theory help us to understand that how the research has been done on a small subject like emotion, which is something we don't even We don't even observe. We don't even like, it doesn't matter a lot in our daily life. We don't put thought into it. But these theories have told us that a lot of research has been done into understanding a basic phenomena, so that we understand that how a person experiences an emotion, and we can use these theories to understand how a patient experiences emotion. Is the person sweating while he's getting nervous? Is a person uh, getting angry and at the same time shouting? So these theories can be used to understand how a person perceives the emotions individually.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Can we know your area of research?
Yeah, definitely. My area of research is I'm studying about reproductive health of women above the age of 40.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think will close the class in 2 minutes. Any doubt? Any query? Was I clear enough?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And will you be able to share this slides as a PDF?
I don't know if that is allowed. I'll ask and we'll get back.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, someone has asked a question on chat. I'll just go. Okay, please explain the Lange theory. If you do a missing intermediate cycle. Yes, you can get admission after clearing UGC NET. Publications are not necessary for admission into PhD. And MSc specialization also doesn't affect very much how your PhD goes. Although in some institutions it may be necessary. Any other questions? No? Then I think we'll close the class. Thank you, everyone. I'm Anuradha Nautiyal, and it has been a pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am. Fruitful session, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone asked if can anyone survive without emotions. Thank you. I'm leaving.